So I'm Brett Luddle. I'm one of your Goshen City Council at Large representatives. Just don't do little quad.
Oh gosh. And I'm Linda Gerber. I'm also a city councilor at large. And it's really incredible to see everyone out here. We are both really glad to welcome you here tonight and grateful that you took your time out of the evening to be here. We would both like to offer a special welcome to State Representative Joanna King and State Senator Blake Dorio. Thank you for being here.
So this event came together because residents started asking questions and expressing concerns. And because of a call that Elkhart County Councilmember Stephen Clark made during a recent Elkhart County Council meeting, his comments helped spark the idea to gather as a community and take a closer look at what this new law means for both the city of Goshen and Elkhart County at large.
What's especially meaningful about tonight is that it is bipartisan. We may not all see every issue in the same way, I know we don't, but we're united in our concern about the impact of SEA 1 and in our commitment to Goshen's future. We're here because we care deeply about our community, about how decisions made at the state level affect our county, school, city, and our local institutions. And we want to make sure that everyone has clear, factual information and practical ways to advocate on behalf of our community.
So before we get started this evening, we would like to thank the individuals that helped plan this event, as well as our presenters this evening. And I also would like to have a special thank you to the Goshen Theater and the donation that made this evening possible to utilize this great facility. This evening. First, we'll have Mayor Gina Leichty, and then Stephen Clark will walk us through what SEA 1 does and how it could affect local institutions and budgets here in Elkhart County. And so for those of you who don't know, Gina is our mayor of Goshen, and she's bringing both a local government and community development perspective, while Stephen Clark serves as the Elkhart County Council at Large candidate, where he's been a strong voice for both fiscal responsibility and transparency.
After their presentation, we will invite Representative King and Senator Dorio to join them for a Q&A session. And at this point, you will be allowed to submit questions on a QR code that will appear on the slides that will be behind us. And the mayor will walk you through how to access the QR code, and then you can submit your questions online. Brett and I will review those questions and present as many as possible, although we may not be able to pick all of them. So before we begin, just a quick reminder, there are concessions available in the foyer, and so please feel free to grab something, get comfortable. And thank you again for being here, for caring about this community, and for taking the time to listen and engage. Before we turn it over to Mayor Leichty and County Councilmember Clark, Phil Letterock has a few things that you would like to say.
Thank you. It's impressive that you all are here. My name is Phil Letterock, and I want to make a clear statement, and I want to offer an apology before we get started tonight. This is in reference to the posters put up around town advertising this meeting. For my statement, I'd like to say that neither the Goshen City Democratic Party nor the Call to Action Task Force paid for the posters. I paid for them myself. I thought I was doing something helpful, trying to get word out to as many people as possible that Mayor Leichty and Councilor Clark would be talking about an extremely important issue that has such significance to the city we love. I have heard from various reliable resources that these posters have caused harm and broken relationships. I acknowledge my culpability and recognize that sometimes even actions taken with the best of intentions have negative consequences. So I want to begin mending relationships I may have broken. Therefore, I would like to formally apologize to anyone who was hurt by my actions, and I ask that these posters should in no way be associated with the mayor or others who had no knowledge of my actions. With that said, I sincerely thank all of you for coming out tonight. If you are here, you likely share a deep love for our community and, like all of us present, want what is best for Goshen and Elkhart County. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Wow. If you would have told me that hundreds and hundreds of people would come out for a lecture on taxes on a Thursday night, I would say only in Goshen. All right, next, Jerry. And we're gonna advance 2 slides, please. That's the one we're looking for. Okay, first, this is the very most important thing that I want you to take away from our conversation tonight. And we're also gonna do a little bit of practice. So if everyone in the room could please pull out your phone and open your camera app. We have a lot of people in our community that are hurting because of food insecurity right now. And we've put a page on our website that gives more details about how you can step up and support these organizations. So on this slide, you'll see people, everything from individuals who've set up pantries in front of their home. They've transitioned their neighborhood sharing library into cans and various goods that people need to get by day to day, or larger food pantries that are supporting multiple food agencies throughout the county. But I encourage you to step up and donate. There's lots of people out there that are hurting and need our help. So that's priority number 1. Now, does everybody know how to use a QR code? When you focus on the QR code using your camera, there should be something that appears on your screen that says, go to whatever app you use to navigate the internet. You click on that, and that should take you to the specific webpage. And you'll need that QR code later because next, Jerry. This is the QR code if you want to ask us a question. So this QR code is a different QR code than the one that's about food insecurity. This is the I want to ask a question QR code. And this will be somewhere on almost every slide. I couldn't fit it on every single one. But as we are going through our conversation tonight, if something pops in your head that you'd really like more information on, or you're like, I have a question I'd like a little more detail on, this is your opportunity to ask questions. Now, we're only going to have about 15 minutes at the end of our time together tonight to answer questions. So there is a place on that submission form where you can leave a phone number and email address, and that will allow Stephen and I, as well as Blake and Joanna, to follow up with any questions that you might have. So with that, why are we here? Next, Jerry. So in April of this past year, the Indiana State Legislature passed some of the most sweeping changes in property tax law that the legislature has ever passed. And there were massive changes that impacted not only the way that the state collects property taxes, but also included income tax, our tax increment financing, the way our net assessed values are calculated, and had some impacts on borrowing for municipalities. And it also had some adverse impacts and cuts to revenue flexibility for different units of government. And for the first time in history, there wasn't a state money involved that would help offset or defray some of those costs. So in Indiana's tax change history over time, in the past, there's been some kind of, whether it was through sales tax or some other mechanism, there was some way to help offset those costs. And so this was some really a diversion from the way that things had happened in the past. Next, Jerry. And while there were some really good reasons to make changes in the way that our property taxes are issued and calculated, and there's some people that were really hurting, and there was some good intentions behind making those laws. And we're gonna talk about why in a little bit, but there were also some really devastating unintended consequences. The new law is extremely complex. The final version of the law, I think, was 383 pages. And we'll talk about some of the things that got pulled into that law as it was being developed. And for residents, ultimately, what it could mean if we don't make changes in time, it could ultimately mean that you end up paying more and getting less for your investment in your property taxes and in our community. And this will start happening as soon as 2026. So we're hoping that we can start making some adjustments in 2026 that will help us avoid some of the most catastrophic things that are looming on the horizon if nothing were to happen. So with that, and I want to just thank Stephen for his willingness to participate tonight and join us in this conversation. This really is affecting both cities and counties in different ways. And I think it's a great opportunity for those of you who are here tonight to hear about how it's going to impact the county as well as our city itself.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And if anybody ever tells you democracy is dead, look around this room for people to show up and hear about your property. I was hoping we'd have 10 people. Here we are. If we can go to the next slide, please. And we'll go to the next one. I'm going to explain a little bit about how our property taxes are collected. And I'm going to give very high level. There's thousands of pages of nuance, and if somebody tells you they understand the whole thing, I would call shenanigans. So the big thing that you need to know on your property taxes is that it is based on what's called a levy system. And so every municipality, every organization that is a government organization, so schools, your cities, your county, those are your big ones, your townships, your libraries, they all get a little piece. But the levy, the best way I can picture it is picture a pie. You have a pie, and whatever can be collected in that is your levy. You can't collect more than what is in that pie. Every year, that pie gets a little bit bigger. And how big it grows is what's called the MLGQ, the Max Levy Growth Quotient. That used to be based on the 5 years since the 1970s, I believe. It's been based on the rolling 5 years of Hoosier income, non-farm income to be specific. So the theory for that was we don't want property taxes to go up higher than what people's income is going up. So we're going to average the last 5 years, and that is how much it can go up. Now, if everybody remembers in 2020, a lot of pay jumped significantly. And so we had kind of very high inflation for a number of years, and income in particular jumped. So what the state legislature did is they came in and said, okay, it's going up too much still, and they put a further cap, and now it's set on whatever they've kind of set it on. This year it was 4%. For 2026, it's 4%. And so every year the pie gets a little bit bigger depending on what that MLGQ is. So that's a big thing to say. So then all the municipalities get together, we submit our budgets downstate to the Department of Local Government and Finance, DLGF, and they put it together and they say, okay, your entire levy only went up by 4%. Now this is how much money is in that levy, and that sets your tax rate. That tax rate is largely irrelevant at this point, but if you want to be a real cunning politician, what you say is, well, every year the rate went down. But if I'm on your side, right, I'm a taxpayer, I'd be like, well, I don't really care if the rate went down. I want to know why my property taxes went up. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship in that. But it sets the max levy, and then it gets divided up amongst all the different municipalities, the schools, everybody I just described. There's a fly up here just being wonderful. One thing that's a little weird on this levy system is, hypothetically, if the county council cuts our budget, your property taxes don't go down. The school will get more, or the cities, or whatever. If the city does it, and the inverse is true. So it's this weird way where you're competing for this pie, and you don't really want your slice to get smaller because another person is not better off. It's a really terrible system, right? So we're all competing for these resources. Next slide, please. So, yeah, we won't go into that. I'll go, next slide, please. It's the same thing I just kind of told you. So, yeah, the levy collected is the total pie. We've already kind of went through this, so we'll skip. Next slide. The rate is your slice of the pie. So if you go and you look at your tax bill, and I'm going to make a prediction here, because for the overwhelming majority of people in Elkhart County, if you look at, it gives you, when you look at your tax bill, it gives you last year and it gives you this year. If you look at last year, you're going to see that your property taxes were probably lower. Not 100%, some people's went down. But yeah, that's right. Did anybody's property taxes go down by any chance? No. Now I'm going to challenge you to go look at your rate. Your rate, I bet, probably did go down. And that's that inverse reaction. So we submit, the state tells us kind of the rate, and then we apply that towards whatever the assessed value is. Remember, you cannot pay more than 1% of your personal, of your home, 2% for rentals, and businesses are at 3%. Next slide, please. We went through this. So now this is where I want to show you. This is actually my prop. If I can go to the next slide. This is my personal property tax bill. And so when I was trying to learn more about this, I actually pulled my bill. Now there's a couple things I want to explain that are really important here. So my assessed value went up 6.1% in a year. And there's reasons we'll get into why that is. But my tax bill only went up 5.3%. So if my assessed value jumps by 6.1, how did my well, because the rate went down. Because assessed value is going up faster than the MLGQ. So the only way to mathematically make that work is your rate goes down. Now again, for a taxpayer, what do you care? My taxes went up. That's what most people are going to care about. So I did a scenario here, year 1, year 2, year 3, and if you can get in Excel and do this, if every year your assessed value goes up 6.1%, but the MLGQ is capped at 4%, you can see where the rate is going to go down every year. You start at 1.52%, then you're going to go down to 1.49%, then you're going to go down to 1.46%. So you multiply 1.46 times your assessed value, and in this case you don't have any deductions, which you do on yours. Right now you're going to have a homestead and a supplemental. That is what gives you the amount you pay. That's how that generally works, for lack of a better term. Next slide, please. Now, something that a lot of people don't know is there's a nonpartisan, the Tax Foundation. I think they lean a little right, which I'm okay with as a Republican, but they call themselves nonpartisan, and they ranked Indiana fifth best in the country on property taxes. And so people don't realize that a lot. Now, go look at who the next 4 were, right? So you're gonna see things like Florida. Guess what Florida has? Tourism. People want to go there in the winter. Things that we don't have. Wyoming, they have oil. Texas, they have oil. The places that are beating us, we can't compete with them because they have typically natural resources that we don't have. Now look at anybody who's similar. If we can go to the next slide, please. We dominate them. And so you have to look at Iowa, look at Michigan, look at Illinois, look at Kentucky, look at Ohio, look at Missouri. None of them were beating us. Our property taxes as a comparison, And our overall Hoosier tax burden was actually much better than the rest. So we were in the top 10, which again, go to look at the other ones. Yeah, if you live in Alaska, they have a lot of oil. I think they pay you, if I remember correctly. We can't compete with that. But the people that we do compete with, we do better than them. And I'll give our state legislators a lot of the credit on that. So, I always ask this question, if we're ranked 5th and we're beating our competitors, why do a property tax bill? And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'm going to give an opinion on part of this. If we can go to the next slide. We had an election, and I always tell people the same thing. The first rule of economics, I studied economics in undergrad, is scarcity of resources. Not everybody can have everything they want. What's the first rule of politics? You ignore the first rule of economics. That's the first thing you do. So if you're at the federal level, what do? You rack up $37 trillion in debt. And you say, you can have whatever you want, and you don't have to pay for it. And then you say, okay, well, what are we going to cut? And, well, not that, well, not that, well, not that, well, not that. So what do you want to cut? Foreign aid, a fraction of a decimal percent. But not that country, because I like them. So if you're running for state office, if you're running for governor in particular, I want to cut your taxes. And there's something sentimental about the home. It's also, you see it as a lump sum twice a year, right? Well, you actually pay more in sales tax every year if you do the math. I pay way more. But I see it in fractions of a decimal. And the other thing is, well, I don't want to, if I'm running for governor, I don't want to cut the sales tax. I mean, that's going to affect my budget. So at the federal level, we just print money. At the state level, I'm going to cut your taxes, and I'm not going to deal with the consequences because that's going to be a local issue now. Now, I'm going to give a lot of credit to our state legislators up here. I've talked to both of them. I know them both, and they have come alongside of us to try to work through some of this. But if you're running for governor, you know what's really popular? I'm going to cut your taxes, and I won't have to deal with the consequences of that. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I thought we were on this one. My apologies.
Which one?
Yeah, so, okay, so with assessed values, we had, especially during COVID, you had a lot of people moving in the state of Indiana. They wanted to leave Chicago and places where you were cramped with other people. We had the federal government dumped, if I remember right, around $7 trillion, whether it's ARP funds or PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. And we had inflation like we hadn't seen. So you've got inflation, you've got a war in Ukraine that doubled the cost of concrete. So then everybody goes to asphalt. I mean, we just had all kinds of inflation. And then again, so you see that in your homes, and at the same time, governments are contracting and contracting, so now we can't do a lot of things we used to do. So infrastructure, if you're a developer, infrastructure is one of your largest costs, which is water, sewer, roads. So now, private entities have to do that. That creates a bubble or an inflationary push on homes. And honestly, if we got rid of all property taxes, homes would skyrocket even more because you'd have more people buying property. So it's this weird thing. But when the governor was running, he won on that. He ran on this, won on this. If you remember, another one was talking about axe the tax. And to her credit, she was talking about income tax at the state level. But when Governor Braun was running, it was a big thing on property tax. And if you could, no, he's on. And then whenever St. Patrick's Day is, they had a big rally down at the State House, wear green, to come down and say property tax is theft. And I always ask those people, I said, okay, why is property tax theft and not all taxes, you know? We have to pay for services, right? Do you want the basic, do you want roads, do you want police officers, this and that? How you collect it, we can debate, but I don't understand why that one is unique to all taxes. Why is my income different? But people went down, they had big protests, and again, what I'll argue our state legislators were hearing from more than anything were people talking about property taxes. Nobody goes to a state legislator and says, you know what, I think my property taxes are fair, right? You hear from the people who are loudest, and that's a great example of it. So then Governor Braun had a lot of comments about, well, they're buying shiny objects. And so there's a difference here that I do want to talk about, expenditures versus budgeting. So the thing I told you about earlier, they were called ARP funds, American Rescue Plan. At the county, we got, Patty, correct me if I'm wrong, $40 million given to us by the federal government, and they said you have 2 years to spend it. And if you don't spend it, we're going to give it to another county, municipality, whatever. So expenditures went up. That's one of the ways we paid for the courthouse. That's, oh, sorry. I'll stop. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to.
No, but
Next slide, Jerry,
we weren't just
please.
spending on shiny objects, as I kept hearing.
As mayors were going down, as the legislators were in session, and there were lots of bills this year, and I'm sure Blake and Joanna will affirm that there were an incredible amount of pieces of legislation under consideration. And so as mayors and others who were trying to track all this, we spent a lot of time in Indianapolis this winter. But one of the things I heard in conversations with our legislators is we see that many of the local municipalities or local units of government, so libraries and schools, your budgets just keep going up, and they've gone up astronomically, and that's what Stephen was talking about in reference to budgets versus expenditures. Your budgets are going up astronomically, and you're sitting on piles of cash. And there's some reasons that was happening, that our budgets were increasing. And so there were several reasons that those expenditures were increasing. So
Next slide.
Yes, sorry. The first reason that budgets were increasing and expenditures were increasing had to do with pressures on public safety. When I first came in as mayor, we were paying our officers about $65,000 a year. And the state decided that same year that they were going to start all of their state troopers at $70,000 a year. And there were police officer shortages as local units of government started poaching, basically, officers from one community to another. The starting salary for an officer in Mishawaka today is $90,000. So this competition that the state was a contributor in part of that, and it's they were trying to reevaluate what is a fair wage for officers. So I don't want to give an inclination that this isn't a fair wage, but it was a significant jump. And it was one, as we've talked about earlier, there are caps to how much our budget can grow each year. So it basically means we have to take that from somewhere else. We have to reallocate that portion of our budget. So there were pressures on public safety, and of course.
So at the county level, we lost so many officers at one point that we didn't want to make it public. We were pulling officers from the road to put them in the jail because that's where you're going to get a 1983 claim. So that's where you're going to get sued if you don't have enough officers in there. Because it started, like she said, Mishawaka, then Goshen has to do it, then Elkhart does it. Napanee is one of the few cities that didn't do it. They lost officers because of it. And now if you're in Napanee, if you want to look up something later, it's public record. Nick Havert has about 30 years experience with the Napanee PD. Patrick O'Keefe has 15 years experience. The Indiana State Trooper with half the time makes 50% more. So who wouldn't jump for a 50% pay raise, right? To have a substantially similar job. That's a true thing that we had to deal with. And at the county, we only do raises once a year. We had to do them mid-year because we had so many officers that we just couldn't compete. We were scared of getting sued.
Okay, next slide, Jerry. We actually went into some of the detail on this. This shows the increase in expenditures by the state on officers and public safety in general. Next slide. This is the other reason that budgets were increasing so significantly between 2020 and 2025. You'll see that the state of Indiana got about $5.7 billion, Elkhart County about 46 million, and the city of Goshen had about $7.7 million that came into the city. So were added onto our budgets, which those were designated funds for things like infrastructure. And this was money, grant money that came from the federal government. But if you remember what was happening in 2020 and 2021, we couldn't even have everybody fully staffed. So we have supply chain shortages that delayed projects. We had people not able to work because we had to space everybody out. So that delayed the implementation of many of our projects. And so the cutoff date for spending all of those dollars is not until the end of 2026. So we still have some residual projects that is ARPA money or federal money that will show up on the city's books and the city's budgets as increases in our budgets and increases in our expenditures, because those are grant dollars that are reflected that keep getting carried over year to year. Now, once that money is spent down, it will go away. We should return to our normal budget. So you would see, if you looked at our budget year over year, significant increases in our overall budget. So our budget in the time that I came jumped millions of dollars, and a lot of that had to do with infrastructure projects that were funded by ARPA grants money. Next slide. The other thing that all municipalities and the state is grappling with is the exponential increase in the cost of infrastructure. So just by way of example, a project that is absolutely necessary $120 million. So we are grappling with escalating costs that are not the same kind of inflation that you're seeing in your day-to-day expenditures at your home. And Stephen's in the construction industry and can talk a little bit just about some of the specifics with the materials that you're seeing as well.
Yeah, you know, every year I look at inflation because that's one of the bases for when we give raises at my company, and I work in construction, and it always, when someone says, well, inflation last year was 3%. Well, not if you're building roads. And so I went back, and this data comes from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. They're the ones that track the price of asphalt. And so I went and looked, and these are numbers you can pull up yourself. From 1986 to 2005, the total increase in that 19-year period, so I took the entirety I could see and I cut it in half, it was 30%. And that's about 1.57% per year. So now let's do the next 19 years. It went up 183%. And if you look at the graph up there, a lot of that is in the last 5 years. From 2020 to 2025, the price of asphalt went up more than it went up from 1986 to 2005. So that's what we're grabbing. So how do you do that? Well, you pave your roads a little less, you do chip and seal a lot more to get them to last longer, and you see what's called the PACER rating, which is how we kind of measure how good our roads are. You can see that decrease.
Next.
Now, when we were talking about expenditures, another way to think about it, imagine you have a home budget, right? And then your whoever comes to you and says, hey, here's a gift card, or here's some cash, just for you to go spend on it. They give it to you for your birthday. They give you $100. Does that affect your budget? No. So we have had increases in expenditures, but the budget, especially your levy-based budget, is capped. It can't go up more than the MLGQ. What's interesting is I downloaded an Excel report that shows every expenditure for every state, and you can get it online. And so I created what's called an X lookup. If I've got any Excel nerds in here, yeah. So I did an X lookup, and I searched it where you can just type in the state, and it'll tell you how much they went up. And I created this little formula. So I looked up, first thing was Indiana, because when we keep getting these hits from the governor saying, well, their expenditures are out of control. Okay, well let's check it against yours. In the first 5 years I looked at, they went up 2.3% from 2010 to 2014. 2.3 in 5 years. Next 5 years they went up 16%. In the next 5 years they went up 34.7%. Expenditure, but again, that doesn't matter for your tax bill. Well, why is that? ARP funds, CARES Act, all that stuff we were talking about. You pour money into the economy, you tell people they have to spend it, that's going to affect expenditures, but it doesn't affect your state taxes, or your local taxes, sorry.
So, we have all of these pressures. We have changes in expenditures, and we have Hoosiers talking to their legislators and the governor and saying, we need to make changes. So, next. They made a big ugly baby. I talked before about the largesse of this bill, and there are many, many things that are part of this bill. So we had the folks on the Senate side really focusing on what kind of property tax changes could we implement that would help alleviate the stress and strain on Hoosier families and make sure nobody's being priced out of their home. On the House side, we had folks really working hard on the local income tax side. And then they brought all of those things together, and it took a long time. Towards the very end of the session, there was lots of going back and forth to finally pull all of those pieces into one bill, which is why it was so large, so complicated, and there really wasn't an adequate amount of time to do the comprehensive, in-depth financial analysis that would be required to understand all of the components of the bill's full implications. One of the things that we're being told right now is that we won't actually have the full financial analysis from the state until probably 2027. And the reason for that is that the income tax data isn't already available, and so of the 92 counties, only 4 counties have a complete parcel by parcel analysis of what income tax revenue would be in every single household in every single municipality. It will take a long time to work through that data. Even with the miraculous advent of AI, it still takes a lot of data sifting to provide all of that. So we are relying on projections that have been produced by the state and by our financial advisors, and we're working hard to come to an agreed upon understanding of what are those full implications and how should we be measuring how this impact is going to be realized. Next, we have about 15 minutes, and then we're going to do Q&A. So I'm going to fly through this part. We've already talked about some of the big changes on the property tax side. This will be higher income tax or higher credits that will be added to the bill. Next, on the income tax structure. So the state of Indiana, since we have property tax caps, tried to provide relief to local communities by allowing local communities to add an income tax. So you pay state income tax and then you pay local municipal income tax. With the new legislation, the local income tax structure that we have now will be phased out completely by the end of 2027. And that's really where the pain for a lot of municipalities is happening. Because that's for the city of Goshen, it's about $13 million in total. And so that amount in combination with the property tax changes results in a loss of revenue for us of about $14 million that we'll have to make up that we're currently getting. Now, the state has provided a mechanism of a new formula for a new local option income tax. But we'll look at the implications of some of that. Jerry, we're gonna fast forward through a couple of these. I have some details, and I will make all of these slides available on the city website, so if you really wanna nerd out later and go through the details, I will be happy to share those with you. But we do wanna make sure that this is a conversation that you can ask us questions about while we're here today. Let's see, next. So just going through some details. Next, the business personal property tax. This is a big one that's going to impact our overall property tax collection. So right now, there's an exemption that you can get if you are a business owner. If you have less than $80,000 worth of personal property tax, you're exempt from filing or being charged any tax for things like the equipment that you have, or in a manufacturing community like ours, all of the equipment that's needed to build RVs, say. And in 2027, that's going to leap from $80,000 to $2 million. So that means that many more businesses will not be paying that business personal property tax. So that really is a major revenue reduction for our community. And then we talked earlier about changes to TIF revenue, and what's the end result of that? So I mentioned earlier for Goshen, the total loss in revenue that we would have with the combination of the property tax changes and the lit income tax changes would be about $14 million. If we added back our city council would have to adopt every year a municipal income tax. If we adopted the full amount every year, we would still be about $4 million short in revenue. For the city of Elkhart, it's much worse. They would be short about $20 million. And for the city of Mishawaka, it would be about $15 million. So what we're talking to the state about now is, can we relook at that formula? And can we do it soon before we get to that full phase out at the end of 2027? Yes.
Just real quick, on the county side, remember we're not moving the slides up back, but
Okay.
on the county side, we will actually probably be okay because we're gonna be getting their local income tax. So the way it's divided now is it's a mix of industry and population. The new formula is just straight population. That really benefits the county and it really hurts the cities, especially if you're a city with a large manufacturing base. Like Napanee, they quadruple in size during the day, but they don't have a big population. They're gonna be hurt, similar to the other ones.
Okay, we're gonna jump ahead a bunch of slides. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Go. Where do we go next?
Blake,
There will be.
Q&A for you on that.
Where do we go from here? Next. The first item we'd like to ask for, so if you want to, and I know all of you are here tonight to advocate for our community, and I will say this is the first time that Blake and Joanna have heard this information as well. So, but if we're going to talk to our state representatives, number one, be respectful. Number two, one of the things that we're asking them to consider, typically they do budget planning every 2 years. What we are asking for is we would like to see some fixes in the 2026 legislative session. And to their credit, what I have heard from Blake and Joanna and our other legislators, they know that there is an issue. They are committed to working on some fixes for us. So 2026 is the fix. Next. One of the things that would be incredibly helpful, I think I have the line in here, let's go back to the future. So as Stephen mentioned, the way that the local income taxes are collected now, they're collected countywide and then they're distributed, so there's not a difference in the rate between what the county would charge or what the city would charge. We could solve most of the problems with SEA 1 if we had the option of going back to our old system or some version that was pretty close to it. So if the same amount of revenue or the same amount of tax was collected across the entire county and distributed in the way it was before, we would not have that $4 million gap that we're looking at now. So if we could consider the option, now that doesn't work for every community in Indiana, and that's the complexity that Blake and Joanna will have to grapple with their other colleagues in the Senate and the House. What works for Elkhart County is going to be very different than what works in other places, and they're going to have to find something that will work for everybody, but we'd love to have that option of flexibility. The next thing we'd like to ask for, at this point in time, as part of the legislation, there's a requirement that all units of government would have to vote on income tax every single year. And what we would like to see and advocate for is we'd like parity with the state. So we would like the option of being able to adopt our income tax at the same timing and frequency that the state adopts theirs. Next. This is you.
Yeah, so the MLGQ, so the question is, get rid of the MLGQ would be one of my things, go to a rate-based system. So for example, if the population of Elkhart County doubled tomorrow, now it's not going to, but hypothetically if it did, how much would our budget be able to go up? 4%. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Give me when people are like, run it like a business, I run a business. Who would double their revenue and not increase overhead? That's not logical. So get rid of the MLGQ. You have to reform it or raise it or do something. And that is, I've heard, a stated goal, but we need to get there.
Next. This is the extra.
Yeah, the property, again, voting on this every year, that makes it very difficult to budget for the future, because what happens if you get a new county council or a new city council? And again, it's just not good for bonding. There's all kinds of issues with that. Get rid of it, and we already have 2 hearings that are kind of pointless. You come, we read the budget line by line.
It's not pointless, it's very important civic.
Nobody shows up, even I'm bored out. We've already determined the budget, now we're gonna have a third. Woohoo!
Business personal property tax, that's you too.
Yeah, business personal property tax. So remember that pie. So this is one of the biggest concerns I have at the county level is, so my tax rate is 0.86% of my gross assessed value, which means for me to go up to the cap, I could go up about 13.5%. When you pull business personal property tax up out of the pie, that's gonna get filled in. The probability is with no changes, my tax rate, my home tax rate is going to go up roughly 13.5%. So how are we gonna do that? By businesses are gonna get a huge tax cut, and I'm not saying that we're against that. I'm not going against business personal property but what are we filling that with? Because the way the levy is now is my property taxes are likely to go up quite a bit. And that's a real concern I have for a lot of people.
Next. One of the things that we're hearing from the state legislature is that there may be some conversations about modernizing government, and one of the ways is looking at our township relationships. And there are different, Indiana has an extremely complex and layered system. We have 11,000, I believe, elected officials in the state, and we have almost more elected officials per capita in Indiana than in any other state. So one of the things that we could do is look at streamlining those relationships or looking at townships in general. If there are cost savings to be had, that should be something that we welcome a re-examination of in the future.
Get rid of the county council.
Amen. Just kidding. All right, and then finally, the last thing. I talked earlier about the the data that's dragging behind some of the decision making and making it more complicated to really have data-driven decisions. We are not opposed to change. And when I talk to my fellow mayors across the state, what I'm hearing is we're not opposed, we just want to make sure that we're making decisions grounded in good data. And that, most of the mayors across the state are Republican, they're very financially conservative, fiscally conservative, as I also consider myself to be fiscally conservative. So we're trying to make good, careful decisions about how we steward your dollars and your investment in this community. So we just want to make sure that we're working together, and I'm pleased to say that I am hearing positive responses from our legislators, both locally and throughout the state, that they are willing to work with us. But let's continue to study and make sure that we've got the data that we need in order to make those decisions together. All right, we have arrived at our question time, and we will have time, and Brett and Linda will have sifted through your hundreds of questions, and we'll give an opportunity to do some questions. I've got an extra 5 minutes if we want to give an extra 5 minutes. But Senator and Representative King, if you would like to join us on stage, you're welcome to help us answer any of these questions that we will be asked. We'll move things around a little bit here.
And we understand that the QR was not large enough for a lot of you, so it's back up there and you can get your questions through now at this point.
And we do have a number of really great questions that, for instance, concerning the school system and our public libraries, and although they're excellent questions, some of us may not be equipped to answer those as we're concentrating more on municipal impacts. So we do thank you for those questions, and I'm sure we can forward those to the appropriate individuals who might have better information on some of those.
So we have one really good question about the business property tax. What was the motivation for raising the exemption on business property taxes 3.5 times? Private people haven't been given that benefit.
I'll give this to them, but I'll note it was much more than 3.5 times. It went from 80,000 to 2 million. So.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Mayor Leichty and Councilor Clark, for doing this. This has been very great to hear this presentation. I'm sure everyone here has learned a lot. There's a lot to learn in this bill. Getting back to the business personal property, really what we were looking at is looking at ways to increase prosperity in the state of Indiana. Right now, Indiana has more people moving to the state of Indiana than any other state in the Midwest. That means our population is growing. That's one of the reasons we're having an issue with the assessed valuation, right? Housing is a huge problem. Goshen is working on that. Goshen is one of the towns that has one of the biggest housing projects on the books right now, which should help all of us out. The more houses you have, hopefully, the thought is that your property taxes will go down. So this was really about making sure that we continue to be a state that has great jobs, that businesses want to come to. And again, that's something that we can take a look at again. A lot of these things, as Mayor Leichty and Councilman Clark have talked about, are things that we're going to continue to look at. What we have put in place now is really the exemptions. As you move forward to get your property tax bills next year, you'll see a reflection of that. A lot of the other things that we're talking about, the LIT, the AV, those are not coming into play until 2027, 2028. And the good news is with the bills that we are working on for next session, on AV and LIT, it'll probably move that out back, as the Senator Holtman talked to us yesterday, another 2 years. So now you're looking at additional time to be able to say, are we headed in the right direction? One of the things that I brought along, and Senator Dorio made this available, so I just made copies. Senator, you're welcome to come grab. I don't have enough for all of you, but I will keep one. I'll hang on to one that you get a picture of. But this gives you kind of a graphic of what happens every year. So it's not all happening at once. And it gives us all time to go back and look at what do we need to make adjustments at. I think we both know this.
And that's also before the changes that we are planning right now. also,
Can you hold up really quick?
Sorry.
Thank you.
we talked to Senator Holman, who's head of tax and fiscal in the Senate yesterday, and you'll be very happy, Steve. 4 years, you get to vote on it. So,
Will the state adopt this thing?
I have no idea on that. Yeah, we vote every 2 years, we vote on it.
Vote every year if you're gonna go by the
Yeah.
budgeting process.
So anyways, with that, and we also talked a little bit about the business personal property tax, and Senator Holman is trying to figure out how to keep that from moving directly to residential taxes.
Great.
And he talked about that yesterday. Yeah.
Gonna try and put a couple together here. So, Steve, you had mentioned that Elkhart County is gonna be hit pretty hard by this, but there may be other counties that won't be hit hard or maybe even benefit from this possibly. So, with that in mind, is there any way, at the state level, to realize that one-size-fits-all taxation policies may be ineffective? Is there any way to possibly come up with a way of giving counties more autonomy in creating effective taxation policies with still having guidance from the state? That's a tough question. I know there's a lot in there, so.
No, it's a great question. You know, one of the things we're faced with here in Elkhart County, it's a blessing to have so many manufacturers and RV companies here in Elkhart County. We produce 9.85% of the GDP in the state of Indiana. That's a big number. Almost 10% of our GDP comes from Elkhart County. The other side of that is we have a lot of people that come from Michigan and drive down here for their jobs. That means that they are not paying the local taxes that you are paying on your local income taxes. So we've talked to Senator Holman, is there a way for us to capture? Is there a way for other counties on the borders to be able to capture that? And I would argue, I don't know this for a fact, but I would argue there's probably no other county that is impacted by as many people coming from outside of the state, coming into our state and not paying those taxes because we provide so many jobs. If you go to the Michigan line, or really you're on US 20 at 4 o'clock in the morning and you see how much traffic is coming into this county and how many people don't reside in this county, that means you're also not paying the same taxes that you are. So looking at a way, I don't have an answer for that, but it's a challenge that I brought up to the tax and fiscal team because I think that in itself could impact Elkhart County a lot.
I'll give you an example of something I've advocated for is allow locals to be able to do a sales tax on services. So it's a consumption-based tax, it's only what you use, there is no sales tax in the state of Indiana on services that I'm aware of, and allow locals to offset some of the property taxes. What I would never advocate for is all your taxes coming from one big bucket. So for example, I always say if you got rid of all property taxes, what I would do is I'd buy as much property as I could. Because then when I die, my son, who's sitting right here, will inherit that. He'll get stepped up basis and I'll never pay $1 in tax on the increase in value of that. Well, that's not a good system. Well, let's not make it all based on income. Let's not make it all based on sales tax. It's a smaller amount from more sources so that no one demographic or percentage of the population overwhelmingly pays their fair share. So I agree, I would like to see more levers that are up to locals. And then when we do things that you don't like, vote us out. That's how it works. Don't go down to Indy and ask them to do it. Come in into the ballot box.
Okay, next question. I'm a Goshen business owner. Most of my employees live outside of city limits. If Goshen passes a local income tax, do my employees pay that since they work in city limits, or is the tax paid by Goshen city residents?
No, those employees would not pay income tax here. It's based on where you reside, the way the law is written now. And that was the point that Representative King was making. Is there a way or is there a mechanism that can be put into place to help capture some of that revenue? Because as a municipality, it's our roads and streets that are being impacted. So it would be more fair. We have like 20,000 people commuting into the city and working in our manufacturing facilities and our wonderful hospitals and we pay the price to make sure that people can come and work here and be gainfully employed, but there are costs that are associated with that as a municipality, so.
All right, I think we might have time for one or two more here. This question comes from the audience. What was broken with the tax system? And it seems like the fix to make our communities more broke. What about property assessment reform?
We actually right now have a committee working on that. Senator Holden is concentrating on that portion while the House is concentrating on the lid. So we're working on that.
And we don't see those blanket, Senator Dorio and I will not see that language. They're still working on that. But I am assured the mayor and Steve, as soon as we have that language, we will make sure we share it with you so we can begin that process saying, okay, how is this going to now impact us? Again, remembering that the LIP will not impact until 2027, 2028, and from hearing from Senator Holman, it'll probably get pushed back because of this bill. So.
I had a slide that Gina cut, and it said, government, if you think our problems are bad, wait till you see our solutions. So in the early 2000s, there was actually a Supreme Court case, and it basically, so it used to just go up by a certain percent, and they said, no, you can't do that anymore, now it needs to be based on fair market value. So that's actually a constitutional thing that it came from that, and so when they're looking at assessment, it's tricky because there's a constitutional argument, you can't just make a law necessarily.
I think we'll go with this one to the mayor. This question addresses the fact that it appears as though the city budgets will be hurt in the future. And if your office is willing to ask for outside help from the voting public to help make the tough decisions on things that we may or may not need to cut.
There is certainly an opportunity, as Councilor Clark mentioned, we have a number of budget hearings that are open to the public. That is your time to raise your voice and talk about your concerns about how we are spending or what things we may have to make cuts about. In this year's budgeting process, we had more people, more of you showed up and shared your thoughts about considerations that we're making because we already started making some cuts in our budget this year. We asked all of our departments, while we're grappling with the uncertainty that has come from this bill, we're still trying to understand the full impact of this bill and how it might change our future. We want to be as conservative as we possibly can. And so we held our budgets for this year at or below what they were in previous years. That is your opportunity, and I want to thank all of you who took the time to come to those budget hearings and participate. And while Councilor Clark mentioned that sometimes they can feel like a snore, they actually are fascinating as you dig into the numbers and understand that process. I think we're at time, unless we have a really important question that
I'll do one more.
Okay.
We have plenty, and you said that your office will be receiving them.
We will get all of the questions and I will share them with other folks here on the stage and we will respond to you. And if there are questions that even need to be answered by others, we'll be happy to direct those in whatever direction they need to go.
Okay, final question. The state collected another tax surplus for the 2025 fiscal year, $2.5 billion. The state seems to be giving its money, yet local government keeps having their funding options restricted. Local government is being told to do more with less. To keep doing more with less will result in a loss of quality of life. What do state legislators want to see less local spending on? Emergency services, roads, alleys, street signs, sidewalks, bridges, etc.
Well, it may be a surprise to you, but we did not have we had a shortfall this year. We had to cut $2.4 billion out of our state budget. Our state budget is based on anticipated revenue. We look to the future to see what we think, and then we budget conservatively, and even so, we had $2.4 billion that in the last 3 days, we had to figure out what to cut. That meant a lot of things went on the wayside. I had 2 bills that were breast cancer research and pediatric care research that got cut. No funding for them. The bills passed, the fund was created, but there's no revenue for it. That's just one of the many, many things that got cut. It's a process that we work through every year. Indiana does have a balanced budget. We have to have a balanced budget. We work a little differently than our brothers and sisters at the federal level who can't print money. So we live within the means because it's your tax dollars, and we try to be as responsible with that as we can. As far as when you ask, what do I want you to cut, that is up to local government to decide what are the things that we can do without. I've shared this with the mayor, the numbers that we still have at the state. My fiscal team has told me this today. I called again and I said, am I understanding this correct? Goshen will get an increase to what they had gotten, but they will get a decrease of the increase. I know that doesn't make sense. If you were anticipating in getting this much money based on what you had been getting in the past years for the increases, that increase is not going to be as large. That's what we're looking at. Now, we won't know because those numbers, again, are not going to be probably certified until the last week in December. That's what I was told today. Mayor Leichty and I have met multiple times. I'm assuring her that I will keep being available. We're going to work through this process together because the last thing we want is for Goshen to not be the thriving community that we know it is.
Okay, I want to thank all of you again for being here tonight, and we will try to respond to your questions. I also want to thank Representative King and Senator Dorio for graciously joining us tonight. And Councilor Clark for joining me on this